FatEnzo.com.
Boom. Jason Fick, socialmediafreedom.org. Thank you very much for being with me today, this morning. I know it's early. Mr. Fick, I appreciate you joining me on the stream, sir. This is Jason Fick. He's
outstanding.
In a past life, I interviewed him before on a podcast in person. He came to my sweatshop and we did a show. God, you've been going through this for such a long time. He was one of the first to ever be canceled. He had a huge following on Facebook, many different groups, and then Facebook systematically canceled him. And so he's been suing them for the last I don't know how many years, like what, 4 years, 5 years? Trying to get it up to all the way to the Supreme Court. Now you've graced me with another appearance. I really appreciate you. Please, sir, let's break it down. Tell me about what's going on with you and your suit against Facebook and all that legality stuff. Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, let's see. Going back, we started in 2018. In 2016, we caught him red-handed. 2018, I sued. Went after Facebook. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court denied cert. We went back to the start again because we actually had conflicting cases. What I mean by that is when you have precedent that is set that conflicts with other precedent, you can do what's called a motion 60B. Which is essentially you go back and you say, look, you were wrong. Here's why you're wrong. Here's another case that's proving, the original case wrong. So we went on a second run to the Supreme Court, which basically unheard of. Went all the way back up to the Supreme Court. And about 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court denied us cert again. What I mean by that is that the United States Supreme Court had in front of it the ability to fix the entire internet. And why I say that is because I have done this for so long. I know what the problem is with the internet. I know how to resolve it. We put it out in legal briefings and everything else like that. And we gave it to them because, what most people are completely unaware of is that all of these companies, big tech, Google, Facebook, Twitter, all of them, they all choose what information we see, right? I mean, that's just universally known, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's called a feed for a reason. You're being fed.
Correct. You're fed information.
Right.
But what the courts have just not understood is that right there is content development, right? If you develop an idea, you pick and choose what you want to ultimately be seen, right? Or make available. The definition by Webster's definition is to make information available, especially by deliberate effort over time. That's exactly what they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes them content providers. They are content providers. They're not just service providers. They are physically content providers. And by legal definition, they fall under content provision. And there was a case, Google versus Gonzalez, that was in the Supreme Court. It still is there, but they had considered it back in, I think, February. And our case sat on top of that. It came in after that. And all of the questions that were raised in that Google case in oral arguments was the same questions that we had answered. We didn't leave them open-ended. We knew what the answers were. But here's the problem with it. The Supreme Court, and this is the concern that we have, especially about the America as a whole. Our judicial system is more concerned about bureaucrats and big tech and big money than it seems they are about protecting the interests of the public. So a lot, most people think, oh, well, they just can't figure it out. No, they figured it out. They know.
They want control.
The question when they're raising the question of the economic impact that this will have, sure, it's going to have an economic impact because when they actually, implement the law correctly, which is, Section 230, that's what we've been fighting to fix. When they implement it correctly, guess what happens? All these companies that have been feeding you information are then responsible for feeding you information. That changes the dynamic drastically. When people say, well, then what the hell is the point of Section 230, right? That makes no sense. Well, it does, because an interactive computer service is supposed to allow people to interact with each other. User interacts with user, correct? I mean, that's basic. It's not supposed to be about what content they want or don't want. It's supposed to be that we are interacting with each other. Well, as soon as they go from being a bulletin board or a forum into being a content provider, well, then they become responsible for their actions. And that will change everything drastically. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm blown away that they didn't take our case. And I mean, I know it's rare to take a Supreme Court case, but when they're considering Section 230, they're considering the internet, they're considering Gonzalez versus Google, and all of these questions that were raised, and we handed it to them on a silver platter and said, here's how it is, here's why it works, here's the only way it works, because of course it's like a puzzle. It only goes together one way. And we put it together in whole, so now we know what the law does. And unfortunately, where we sit right now is I don't know what the future of America is going to be. The decision with regards to Section 230 and the internet may determine whether free speech exists on the internet or not. I mean, it's that important. It's probably one of the most important cases in modern history. Everybody was so concerned about the Roe versus Wade. And I mean, at the same time, it's like, what about free speech? I mean, free speech is dying. And, there's so many people that they've trained the next generation to just not want to be, they want to be governed. It's bizarre, So we're not giving up, just so you understand, Bobby. Like, you know me.
Thank you.
We've
Thank
met
you very
first,
much.
we've talked. Persistence. It's the only way I think that there is to beat them, because I'm concerned about it every day, is how do we beat them? We can't beat them quickly. This is going to be death by 1,000 paper cuts. We need to keep coming at them and at them and at them and not giving up and realizing that the persistence is what's ultimately going to win this.
Persistence and determination, alone or omnipotent. The slogan "Press On" has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Calvin Coolidge. And you know what? Yeah, it is. That's the number one thing. Now, okay, I know you have this website, right? And there's a lot to talk about. Social Media Freedom Foundation. You started this website. It's pretty awesome. I was going through it yesterday. Socialmediafreedom.org. You talk about how we must fight for freedom online or risk losing our liberties. Everything's here. You have all the different. Are you a lawyer? I mean, you have it all legally written out, the codes, the courts. Like, this is something for you guys to check out if you're interested in Section 230 and freedom on the internet. And like the gentleman was talking about, the Supreme Court took care of Roe v. Wade, right? And they did the right thing when it came to that, I believe.
Right.
But on this such an important matter is our freedom of speech. And you have these guys that are feeding you or squashing you. Cause like, look at me. I've been doing this podcast, Mr. Fick. This is a brand new podcast. You're on my old show. This current show that I'm doing is, I've done 227 episodes. If you like go Google how to start a successful YouTube show, they'll be like, go live every day, right? I've gone live every day for hundreds of days in a row, and I'm still getting the same amount of traction as you would get if you just started the show brand new, right? They cancel numerous channels that I've had. So you can't, like, in this world, start an online business. A podcast would be an online business, right? And you can't you can't do your due diligence. What if I had gotten like an investor to help me out so I wouldn't have to work as much? I could focus on the show every day. That's like destroying your business right there, right? They're not showing it. They actually have algorithms that suppress you, the opposite of feeding you. Then you have people like Tim Pool, for instance, right? And I don't want to disparage Tim Pool or anything like that. He's an okay, I guess. But I don't even subscribe to his channel, but I receive his feed all the time,
right,
with, hey,
Right.
would you like to see this show? Would you like to see this show? So you have people that are being propped up and helped, and then you have people that are being squashed. So you said it before, this, I know this happened on Facebook to you. That's what started this whole stuff, but I know this is happening on all the different social media platforms. You said that you'd know what to do. What would you do? What's the easy solution to fixing the internet?
Well, you use the word propped up.
Right.
A good way to consider it is recommend, right? So Tim Pool's being recommended to you, correct?
Yes, to everybody.
Okay. So recommending content is exactly what's being considered in Google versus Gonzalez. They're saying, well, what's the difference between holding somebody accountable for the content or for the recommendation of the content? There's two different elements there, right? There's content and conduct, an action as opposed to a noun, right? So it's amazing that we've had to break this all the way down to the English language, just a basic understanding of word, right? So here's the thing.
Words are
It is
everything.
not-
God said some words and created the entire universe. Please continue. Sorry.
So the point is this, is that if you are, what Tim Pool puts out is his content, but the recommendation thereof, right? The recommendation that the site gave you that information, right? Would you or would you not say that the site has decided that Tim Pool is worth recommending and therefore provided that forward? They didn't create any of that information, did they? No, they didn't. Well, let me ask you something. And this is the best analogy that I can explain how this works, right? Because a lot of people miss it, right? The difference between the conduct and the content. If you are attempting to create the statute of David, right? You want to develop a statute out of a big block of marble, right? Do you create any marble or do you remove everything that you don't want in order to create something else? That's called developing a statute, right? You chip away at all the pieces you don't want so as what to develop, which is the statute that's left behind. None of that marble you create, you don't put it on there, do you? Because it was already there.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is that the content, just like the statute, is the marble that exists. Making the choices of what to remove ultimately, by proxy, means that you're also deciding what to develop. The statute below. So the quandary, and this is actually, and I've actually run into this with several attorneys. They said, "Well, this is impossible. That's absurd because that's irreconcilable." And I go, "Yes. Think about this. If they're not allowed to develop any information, because the definition of a content provider, they would be held accountable as a content provider, is specifically any person or entity responsible in whole or in part. So even just minimally for the creation or development of any information provided through the internet. Creation is bringing it into existence. Development is just like the statute. It already exists, but it's the manipulation of content. So now, if they can't be the content provider because they're developing information, but they can decide what to remove and what to leave behind, which is development, there's the problem. You can't both be a content provider and not provide content simultaneously. It's impossible. It is what's called a statutory, irreconcilable statutory conflict. It conflicts with itself. And that's what we've told the court is this section, the section that allows them to remove content is unconstitutional because it violates basic canons of statutory law. You cannot both develop and not develop content simultaneously. Doesn't make any sense.
That's right. I think that it's insane.
I know that sounds confusing.
No, I get it. I get it. It's like I always picture like it's back in the 1950s, right? And you're trying to make a phone call and you call you're the operator and you're like, hey, give me Mr. Ionati over in 86 Bassick Street. And then they go, okay. And then they just take, you're supposed to like plug the cord in there, but they just like throw it in the toilet and then, push flush instead. Like they're not making the connection. You know,
right.
I get on here and I take this personally. Mr. Fick. This is insane. I am so tired of this. Okay. You have somebody who's honing his craft. I could obviously speak very well. I'm not going to sit here. I'm a humble person. But I'm not stupid. Okay. I know that I put in, it's like almost like being a comedian and going on stage and working your craft every single day in front of no crowd or something like that. Or people are like shielding people from seeing you or something like that.
No, they're standing outside the doors preventing people from coming in.
Yeah. You're still
That's
getting
what
the
they're
work
doing
done.
to us.
You're still getting the work done though. You're still getting better at your craft, but you're not allowing people to come in and see you. It's crazy, right?
Right.
I think it's just so disgusting. And you got a lot of people behind you. A lot of members are a part of your panel for social media freedom.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of good support, and no one has taken a dime out of this foundation. We have all done this on our own accord. Because we all believe that social media should be free. I mean, we should be able to say what we want. I mean, it doesn't mean that I mean financially free. Like, for example, how Elon Musk is now charging $8 a month for the blue check. And I want to explain that blue check because there's really something unique going on there that people aren't recognizing.
The blue check mark of the beast. Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. So if you were to get a blue check back in the day, the way that you had to do it is you had to apply to Facebook or to Twitter, and say, I'm a notable person, and you have to prove all these things about how you're noteworthy, right?
Mm.
I was noteworthy. I'm involved in a very public fight. I'm very real, etc. And they denied it. Okay, fine, whatever. But the thing is that they were picking winners and losers.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about that, they were choosing who was worth it and who was not worth it. So they were literally picking who they chose as the winner, so to speak. So they would give them all these blue check marks, and that was validation. I am a celebrity, so to speak. I've got a blue check mark. So it was all about validation and ego. Well, things just shifted. And everybody says, well, why would you get a blue check mark now? I said, because it's not about validation and ego. Now it's about verification and performance, because everybody has equal access to it. It's a matter of whether or not you choose to do it. They're not picking winners anymore. They're just verifying that you're in fact real. Well, they've leveled the playing field, and all of these celebrities that are having the meltdown is because they don't have that pat on the back that, oh, you're a winner. They're not.
Yeah. This is reminding me.
I could care less about them.
You're reminding me of the Sneetches, the Dr. Seuss book, the Sneetches, the star bellies, where everybody has a star on their belly, and then they invent a machine to print stars on the people's bellies, and then the people that had the stars on their bellies before, they invent a machine to erase the bellies erase the stars on their bellies. It's the same kind of thing. It's crazy. I'm glad you brought up Elon Musk. Yeah. I wanted to play this really quick. I have a little clip from him talking about how people should have a voice. Listen to this right here. Watch.
FatEnzo.com. The same standard should apply to me as applies to everyone on Twitter, just as it does on positive or negative.
So what do you do?
Same for everyone. Now the thing that a lot of traditional journalists don't like is they don't like being put on the same platform as the average citizen. They don't like their voice being the same. They're pretty mad about that.
Yes, there are several news organizations who don't like your push for democratization and what they believe is the devaluing of the badges because they were differentiated. So is that just a moment in time? Is that just a moment in time?
No, that's deliberate. I think it's very important to elevate citizen journalism. I think it's very important to hear the voice of the people, the actual voice of the people, not the filtered voice of the people. And let the people choose the narrative, and let the people determine the truth, and not 5 editors-in-chiefs of major publications. Do you want to know what's really going on, or do you want their opinion? It's a handful of people. I think we want to know the voice of the people, the true voice of the people.
Outstanding! Pow!
We want to know the true voice of the people.
The segue on this is unbelievable. I mean, if you think about that, everything from the Sneetches all the way to what Elon said. You know, that
Yeah.
is I'm blown away. I mean, I've never seen anybody segue it that well. I mean, here I am. Exactly what I'm saying is, it's a matter of this validation that these journalists want. That how dare they put me on the same level as the average schlub citizen? And then, and you go, I'm sorry, but you are on the, because like you said, you're a smart guy, you're articulate, you come on a show. Why are you being withheld? And it's because you're not a winner. You don't get to be picked for the winner. You don't get your star on your belly. And you have to ask why. Why am I not part of their the turtle club?
Right.
I mean, it's crazy, and that's just it. I mean, that's why I'm so restricted, because and mine is actually a little bit easier to understand. Why am I not huge right now? I already had 38 million fans. I was actually yanked backwards. So you're prevented from going forwards. I'm literally yanked backwards to the point where, and frankly, I don't need the validation.
I had 100,000 views. I've had 100,000 views on one YouTube video. I've been on TLC's reality show. I was an HBO documentary. Yeah. I've had plenty of I've been on stuff. There's no reason for this. I used to always say this on my other show. I used to say, let's try to defeat the algorithm. Some kid in a back room at Google with, crust on his pants is basically picking who wins and loses in life because he learned how to code living in his mommy's basement. That's what I used to say all the time.
Because it's not really about a fair algorithm. And that's what Elon was talking about in that clip, is he's changed the algorithm so that it's fair. If your information that you put out there is worthy, it will grow. And if it's not, it won't. And that's I think what we're all asking for here is and
the cream rise to the top.
Exactly. The cream should rise to the top. It's not about saying, oh, I want to be huge. I need to be huge. I should be huge. No. There are people that are out there that make the dumbest content that can be huge because that's what is accepted by our society. Right. But if that's what people like, that's what people like. But the thing is I can put out good content and people like it, but people aren't even shown it. And if there's an active, element to restrict that, the question is that in good faith as a good Samaritan, which is what would need to be the case for the protections that Section 230 allows. It's not. They're not being good Samaritans. The problem is we got to get the courts to do that. This really comes down to our judicial system has really failed us. I hate to say that, but that's what we're facing right now is our judicial system is not doing their job. They're legislating from the bench. Politics has overtaken the rule of law. And I don't know how we're going to fix that one.
On your website, though, it says, I guess, that some of these Supreme Court justices are kind of in agreement with you. Look at this. Justice Antonin Scalia says, this standard has effectively allowed Congress to grant administrative agencies the authority to create any rules they deem to be in the public interest, solely relying on the agency's own views and policy agenda. Justice Clarence Thomas, this modest understanding, Section 230, is a far cry from what has prevailed in court, adopting the too common practice of reading extra immunity into statutes where it does not belong. Judge Raymond C. Fisher, unless Section 230 imposes some good faith limitation on what a blocking software provider can consider otherwise objectionable, or some requirement that blocking be consistent with user choice, immunity might stretch to cover conduct. Benjamin Franklin, if all printers were determined not to print anything till they were sure it would offend anybody, there would be very little printed. And I'm a printer, so I definitely understand that. Now, it's like now nothing's confirming that we are being suppressed, and a lot of people chalk it up to just paranoia, or that you just suck and you're just bad. Maybe people just don't like it, but I don't believe that that's true. I think that everybody gets a gut feeling, and we know if we're out there and you're putting out content on the regular and nobody's seeing it, that nobody's being recommended this for, and then you want to know what's the reason for this, and who can I even talk to about this? Is there somebody I can call and go, hey, why are you not showing my content? What's going on? Then there's nobody even to contact at these companies and to even try to voice, right?
I love the fact that Facebook would announce that they were hiring 21,000 new employees, not for customer service, for fact checking and content restriction. I mean, you can't get them on the phone. You can't get an answer. You can't get not customer service. Let's hire 21,000 people to restrict our audience even more. Not help them. Let's restrict them more. And the thing is that people, if people are entering social media now, they don't even understand when they ran a business model that was about engagement. We had no issues growing because they wanted to engage content. So they let it go. They let you grow. And now it's all about suppression. That's because they've hit critical mass, because the reality is that everybody says, well, just go to another site. I think it's actually been really funny because everybody that's complaining about Elon and Twitter nowadays, I'm like, just go to another site. And I mean, everything that they have been saying to us, oh, they have a free speech right. I'm using it against them. And I don't believe all of it because, I mean, I think it's ridiculous arguments, but we're showing the hypocrisy, of sure, just go somewhere else. You can't. It's like they're dominating the internet. And the reason that they're dominating the internet is because they're allowed to wipe out their own competition. It's bizarre.
I have a comment about that. What do you think about this? I believe that they're digital robber barons, and just like the late 1800s, early 1900s, you go and you find oil. You're the first person to put steel or create a car, right?
Yep.
What you have here is we have a macro version of the micro version from the cell phone. Okay. You have email, you have text messaging, you have video messaging, right? Email is Facebook. Text messaging is Twitter. Video messaging is Instagram or whatever, or picture messaging is Instagram. Video messaging is YouTube. What we had was these technologies that were created by the cell phone company or whatever, and these people, they stole the idea and applied it on a macro level, and because they were the first in, best dressed, and they got going first, and they have now there is no, you can't find a competitor, right?
Robert Barron's was probably the best description of this. We've even used that back in the day. It's all like claim jumping. You would go on and stake your claim. Think about it this way. And I'll give you a really interesting way to think about this. So gold mining, right? Precious metal mining, right? Gold mining on California. The federal government doesn't own the land, but they do control it, right? They act as a manager of that land, right? And in order to stake your claim on gold, you have to go out, you have to find a mineral, meaning you have to get your initial 50 members for Facebook in order to stake your claim. Your claim is your URL, your unique record locator. Once you staked your claim, you can then mine your ground. Well, the thing is that they allowed people to claim jump. They said, okay, build your audience, build your business, build everything on your thing. And oh, by the way, we're going to take that away from you. We're going to restrict you because we supposedly you violate our regulations. And we're going to give that to Costco's and the Walmarts and so forth. We're going to give that over to the big guys, the big mining companies, because, oh, by the way, those big mining companies just happen to pay the federal government a kickback. And that's literally what happened with Facebook. Is they came in, they said, build your business, build your audience. And oh, by the way, we're now going to give the same space that we offered you as organic reach in the news feed. We're going to actually take that away from you, sell it back to you. And anybody that pays us will actually give that space to in order to provide their content instead of yours. It was the biggest bait and switch that in the modern history. It's like ridiculous how big of a scam it was, and the courts let them get away with it. It doesn't matter how you articulate it, what you do, they just do not hold them accountable.
And Mr. Fick, what do you think happened? Because at before 2000, I would say 15 or so, I feel like the internet was free. And I was getting someplace. Like I said, I had thousands of people on like Facebook. I had thousands of people on Facebook. I was kicked off Facebook. I'm not allowed on Facebook. If I go on Facebook and I set up an account, as soon as I upload my picture, it's immediately canceled, and it says that I'm doing ban or whatever, trying to get rid of whatever, trying to skirt away from being banned or something like that or whatever, because they've already deemed that I'm not allowed to be on there. But what do you think? Do you think it was Trump winning the election that really made them tighten down everything and go, wow, we need to get a hold of the internet here?
Yeah, I mean, do you recall when Mark Zuckerberg sat in Congress and he apologized? He said it was my fault. I basically let this get away and so forth. It was his arrogance to believe that he could supersede the people, right? He thought he had it all under control, and the reason being is because they announced just prior to the election that they deleted 300 Russian bot accounts. Well, apparently I'm a Russian bot. I mean, this is all fake. This is all, no,
right.
I'm not Russian. I'm not a bot. And I was part of that. And we managed to aggregate about 60 some of those 300 that were wiped out at that one time. And nobody was Russian. We were just supporting the wrong candidate at the time, and they wiped us out. Now they thought that was enough because we were very effective. The reason being is because we weren't political pages. We were just out there producing content and in support. We were good at memes and we were good at echoing this message. And it got away from them. They were not prepared for the overwhelming groundswell that Trump got. So he won. They couldn't stop it. Well, second time around, they really had to hammer down. The problem with that is they couldn't keep it under wraps anymore. They had to do it so blatantly because in order to stop that much groundswell, it becomes obvious. You see it on its face, right? You see the restrictions, and the average grandma would get nailed for saying that, the vaccines are bad. Well, guess what? They're bad. They turned out that's actually correct. It turned out that way. But they nail you for this stuff.
See, they'll probably downvote this, or even give me they'll probably even give me a strike for this. So whatever Mr. Fick just said is
that was my opinion.
Oh, by the way,
not Bobby's.
Let me say this. I want to get speaking of that. Let me get your stance on this. I created a credo, okay? And I want to say the credo really quick, and I want to get your opinion on the credo, if I could, please, before we depart. I believe that the freedom of speech is a universal international right, that all opinions shall be tolerated regardless if agreeable or disagreeable. I believe in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, the freedom of expression, the freedom of religion, not from it, the freedom of the press, the right of the people to peaceably assemble, be it physically or spiritually or digitally or virtually. I believe that truth is non-binary and can be objective, subjective, normative, or complex. There are no eternal facts as there are no absolute truths except the word of God. For us creators and for our content, great thinkers have philosophized. Our founding fathers debated the dangers of cancellation and censorship for centuries. No individual shall be indemnified of criticism or mockery, for there is honesty in jest. I pledge that the ideas I share are my own and are not the expressed opinions of any violent criminal organizations. The only group I represent is the human race, and I reserve the right to interview any of my counterparts without fear, threat, or intimidation, with their opinions being their own, with my opinions being my own, for association does not always equal shared beliefs. I pledge to perform in a professional, dignified manner, not bully, harass, or slander my fellow human creatures, to refrain from hate, anger, sedition, vulgarity, harassment, pornography, cautioning that satire and sarcasm can at times be misinterpreted as such. I believe in the counter-speech doctrine, that the remedy to negative, harmful speech is more positive, helpful speech, not enforced silence, that Section 230 privatizes communism and legalizes libel and stalking, and that content creators who have broken community guidelines in the past deserve retribution because we're all constituents of the human party and humans are fallible. And I also, I skipped one thing. I said, I believe in the separation of church and state and corporation. I missed that one line, but what do you think about that creed that I wrote?
Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be a sentence, and I would be able to affirmatively say yes or no. I can't say yes or no because there's a lot in there.
The particulars as far as Section 230 and when the things that pertain to you and what you're doing.
As far as the Section 230 part, where it privatizes communism, it privatizes state action. It is the way that I would necessarily say it, because it is a delegation of regulatory authority granted by the U.S. government to do a job on behalf of the U.S. government, whether they choose to do it voluntarily or not. That's really what it is. And
the definition of fascism, the definition, I should probably change the line to something about fascism, like it creates fascism, because fascism, the definition of is when state and corporate interests come together.
That is a better fit, because it doesn't necessarily privatize communism, but it does privatize fascism for sure. There is the combination between state and private organization. It's very much like another case, Carter versus Carter Coal Mining, where the government gave them the power to private entities to regulate the affairs of others, and inevitably they're gonna regulate with a bias, and that can't be. They can't do that. So it's something that we're also fighting in a separate case against the United States right now. I don't even know if I mentioned that one. I have a case against the United States of America as well, bringing what's called a constitutional challenge against Section 230 and the law that be. So I mean, I did agree with most everything you've said. It's good to have a creed as to the way you think. Mine is much more simplified, which is do not harm others, and if they were to harm you, is to fight back. So no, I appreciate all of that. That was a lot of information very quickly. I'd be interested in reading it. Do you have that out there?
Yeah, it's out there. It's out there. It's on my Twitter, and it's pinned. RV
Okay.
Piccirillo at RV Piccirillo. Piccirillo. I changed the pronunciation of my. I'm totally trying to get away from the name I used to go by, because I feel like there is a lot of power in words, and they just, I don't know, they use words in order to squash us, I think. And
Oh yeah.
it's crazy. Like I love it. I love it how you broke things down. You break things down to words. When you said that really that that lit a chord, right? Or whatever it is. I understand what you mean by that. That's it really is on that level. You got to get down to the syllable. Yes.
Actually, in fact, if we have time, I'll do one more too. I think that I think that you'll like this. This is probably the most pivotal mistake that all of the courts have made, and why all of this mess exists on the internet right now. Let me ask you a question. What is the most important word in the right to free speech? The right to free speech. Which is the most important word in that?
Is it the?
It is the. In fact, it was James Madison that argued that the word the means that it was a specific right that pre-existed, was already there, right? Because we already know that of the right. Therefore, it is a natural or God-given right that preceded the Constitution, and therefore it precedes any potential abridgment. The word the saved free speech, okay? And here we are, 250 years or so later, right? And we are arguing the same problem, because in Section 230, it says that they shall not be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another. Well, we know who the publisher or speaker is because they pre-exist. It's another content provider. It's very simple. And most of us read it that way. However, the courts have wrestled over what a publisher does or who the publisher is, because they've converted it. Instead of the publisher or speaker, they read it as a publisher or speaker, which means it's indefinite. We don't know who the publisher is or speaker is in that scenario, which means it can be them themselves. And in fact, that's what happened to me. The court said that I cannot treat Facebook as a publisher of information that I provided. Well, who is the publisher of my content? Me. That's the only person they could be treated as. Yet I was unable to treat Facebook as Facebook for Facebook's own publishing actions. Now think about that. If you can't be treated as yourself for your own actions, you recognize that's unlimited immunity, right? That's sovereignty. That's super immunity because you can't be treated as yourself. Well, does that now make sense why they have not been held accountable for anything? Because they can be a publisher, but yet not be treated as a publisher. Meanwhile, the law says they can't be treated as the publisher, which means someone else. It's that simple, and it all hinges on one English word. We know we're right because it's the English language. It's what it means. And yet the courts won't fix it. That's where we stand. Everywhere matters.
I appreciate you very much for joining me this morning. Thank you so much. For people that are following and want to know more about you and your suit and all these numerous suits that you have going on, go to socialmediafreedom.org. What else should they do? Should they go ahead to follow you, Jason Fick, at Jason Fick, JASONFYK?
Twitter is a place to go nowadays because I can say what I want to say. And they don't restrict it. I mean, Facebook is a joke. If I write in Section 230 on any comment, like 5 people see it. You know, I mean, it's crazy how much it's filtered. Twitter is definitely the place to be, and I would definitely move over there. And although it's not everybody's forte because it's a lot more text, it is definitely where freedom is beginning to rear its head.
Right. Hopefully the cream starts to rise to the top. Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate you for joining me, and have a great day, sir. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
See you later. Adios.
Outstanding.
Wow, so that was very, very interesting. I think that everybody should go over to check out his Jason's work, or check out socialmediafreedom.org. There's also a piece that he penned for Western Journal recently. There's an op-ed, "The Right to Free Speech on the Internet May Be Over," by Jason Fick. This was just published. Let me read a little of this. James Madison once argued that the most important word in the right to free speech is "the," because it means the right pre-existed any potential abridgment. That simple distinction saved free speech in America. The very same distinction could save free speech on the internet. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, the so-called 26 words that created the internet, reads, "Treatment of publisher or speaker, no provider or user of any interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider." Section 230 does not say a publisher, it says the publisher, and for good reason. In the English language, a definitive article such as the word "the" in the publisher is used to denote particular specified persons or things. The publisher in the context of Section 230 is the particular or specified publisher who created and or developed the information. In other words, the publisher is not just any unspecified publisher, which could include the provider or user. The publisher is specifically the known publisher of the story. The known publisher in Section 230 is another information content provider, i.e. anyone other than the provider or user, because the content provider has already published the information, i.e. it pre-exists the provider or user. Therefore, the publisher cannot possibly be the provider or user of an interactive computer service because the known publisher or speaker pre-exists the provider's or user's involvement in the story. Despite this seemingly fundamental understanding of the English language, courts have erroneously substituted the term "a publisher" for the publisher all too often, and in doing so, changed the entire meaning and application of Section 230. For example, the Barnes v. Yahoo 3-part immunity test, because Section 230 is technically not immunity from liability, reads, "Immunity from liability exists for 1, a provider or user of an interactive computer service, 2, whom a plaintiff seeks to treat under a state law cause of action as a publisher or speaker, 3, of information provided by another information content provider." The Barnes 3-part immunity test is inconsistent with the actual test of the statute. Compare Barnes to the 3-part treatment test used in Henderson v. Public Data, which accurately quotes and applies Section 230. The defendant is a provider or user of an interactive computer service. 2, the plaintiff's claim holds the defendant responsible as the publisher or speaker of any information. And 3, the relevant information was provided by another information content provider. That distinction is subtle but significant. As a result of conflating the with some courts in some circumstances get it right, i.e., they read Section 230 as not protecting any publishing conduct at all, while other courts in other circumstances get it wrong, i.e., they read Section 230 as protecting all publishing conduct, or as absurd super immunity, as Senator Ted Cruz called it in his Gonzalez v. Google amicus. It is absurd to think that Congress intended to prevent an interactive computer service provider or user from being treated as itself when it acts unlawfully, i.e., as a secondary publisher. Yet that is exactly what has transpired in almost every single court case since day one. Section 230 has misread and misapplied as absurd super immunity. On February 7th, 2023, I filed what is likely the most important petition for writ of certiorari in modern times. It was a petition that could very well have determined whether free speech continues to exist or dies on the internet. And it all hinged once again on the most important word in the right of free speech, the. As the petition notes, this subtle yet critical mistake using and the interchangeably in the publisher or speaker is the genesis of the mistaken interpretation of 230 and the origin of the confusion surrounding 230's proper application. Once the publisher is identified for the purposes of 230, the rest of the statute's intended purpose is clear. During the Gonzalez v. Google oral argument, Justice Brett Kavanaugh said, to pull back now from the interpretation that's been in place, i.e. the status quo, would create a lot of economic dislocation, would really crash the digital economy with all sorts of effects on workers and consumers, retirement plans and what have you. And those are serious concerns and concerns that Congress could account for. We are not equipped to account for that. So are the predictions of problems overstated? If so, how? And are we really the right body to draw back from what had been the text and consistent understanding in courts of appeals? Congress wrote what it wrote. The legislation does not need to be changed. It was not Congress that strayed from the text of Section 230. It was the lower courts that decided to legislate from the bench. In doing so, the courts have created the very internet monsters they now are concerned about hurting. We must ask ourselves, should courts continue with the status quo because of the economic concerns of big tech, or should the courts protect the interest of the public and apply the statute as actually written by the legislature? I say the latter. We gave the Supreme Court the right case and the right solution to fix Section 230 once and for all, but unfortunately on Monday, our petition was denied. I think that was Monday of last week. It would appear the Supreme Court is more concerned about the status quo and the economic interests of big tech companies than the interests of the public and our constitutional rights. The right to free speech on the internet may be over. And I just want to say that, you know what? You could do whatever you want. One of these days, this dam is going to break. And I'm going to be over here perfecting my craft. And you can do whatever you want. You know, but once that dam breaks and we actually reach critical mass and we're at a point where, you do have to let people like myself be shown and be recommended, going right to the sky, because I've already been perfecting my craft and getting better and better and better and putting in the work and, practicing like it's like you're practicing guitar and nobody's showing, you playing your guitar, playing your music to everybody. And all of a sudden, now they do. And now you're wailing on it like Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? I'm going to continue putting in my work. I am very persistent and nobody's going to stop me. So one of these days, the levee is going to break, and then that's it. To the moon, Alice. And by the way, certiorari means to inform in Latin.
1, 2, 3. FatEnzo.com, 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 FatEnzo.com. FatEnzo.com, FatEnzo.com, FatEnzo.com.
Outstanding. Pow!